Thanks everyone for tuning in to this first ever live stream on my channel. Today we are doing something that is a sort of proof of concept. We're going to see how this goes. We're going to try to avoid any catastrophes or any huge technical flubs, but this will be a chance for us to at least experiment. It's nothing too serious. But if you are tuning in or catching this at a later time, definitely appreciate you checking everything out. This is a somewhat of a celebration of 100 subscribers here on my channel, String Six Splash. So if you have been enjoying the content here, I really, really appreciate that. And definitely am open to hearing more feedback, things you've been liking, things you'd like to see coming up. Now, for today, it's a bit of just a live chat, nothing too crazy. Of course, there have been some recent Stardom events that have been happening, and there is a big Stardom show coming up on the 27th. There's also a lot of information about Rossi Ogawa's new company, which is called Marigold. And I'm hoping to talk about some of these things, but there's no real strict sort of structure to any of this. And of course, we're going to leave things open for our guest for today, who is Meerkat Ultra. Now, Meerkat Ultra needs really no introduction. I may be giving one anyway when the time comes. However, we're still workshopping some things. Meerkat Ultra is not quite logged into the stream just yet, but that will be coming very shortly. So if you don't mind, just sit tight for a couple of minutes. We're going to get the full on sort of setup going, and we will definitely be back to talk whatever sort of comes to mind, and hopefully some things that are relevant and enjoyable to listen to. So we will be back. Thanks very much for tuning in, and just sit tight for a little bit. All right, everyone. Thanks once again for tuning in to this live stream, whether you are watching it in real time or you're going back to see a recording of this. Just to reiterate, this is a 100 subscriber sort of celebration. So it's just a chance for me to say thank you so much for any type of feedback or support you've provided to this channel. I'm continuing to try things out. And this is obviously one of those examples where doing some experimenting with possible live content. So if you do have some ideas for how other live streams could be incorporated into String Six Splash, please do let me know. I'm definitely open to hearing suggestions and things like that. But for today, we're just going to test this out and really see how it works, how it goes over, how the presentation ends up sort of coming across. But for the time being, going to just jump into some of the current events before we bring on Meerkat Ultra. So we're still workshopping some things to get Meerkat Ultra on the stream. It is really hard to transport meerkats across the internet, so there can be some difficulties at times. But with that being said, there's plenty to be discussing right now, especially with the looming event that is Stardom All-Star Grand Queendom, which will be happening on April 27th. So from this point on, anything I talk about that has to do with Stardom is going to unfortunately contain some spoilers. We've had a pair of live events that have taken place, not only on the 21st in Japan, so that was last night for Americans, but also the 20th, which was the night before. So two consecutive live events, and those events actually played key roles in setting up new matches, and we're talking big matches, title matches in All-Star Grand Queendom sort of card, their main card. So anything I talk about is going to spoil the results of those shows that have just happened, and it's also going to further elaborate on what we know about All-Star Grand Queendom, which has a number of title matches coming up. So just if you don't know, All-Star Grand Queendom is the big pay-per-view, which will happen at the end of April. And this is sort of a spiritual successor to the biggest Stardom show that has ever happened, as far as I know. All-Star Grand Queendom from 2023 was just a massive event. There was so much star power. And at that event in 2023, there were 5 different title matches that took place. And every single one of those title matches last year involved a title change. So now as we get into this year's All-Star Grand Queendom, April 27th, 2024, we've got just as many, if not more, titles on the line. And things continue to get just more complicated and complex because some of these title matches have a lot of different challengers, a lot of cooks in the kitchen, we'll say. And that's going to make things either very sort of entertaining and high octane or potentially cause some issues. So I do have some mixed feelings on some of these title matches, but I'll get into that in a second. What we should probably talk about first and foremost is the Red Belt Championship that is going to be on the line at All-Star Grand Queendom. Now, if you've been watching Stardom for a decent amount of time and you're familiar with last year's event, that was the very brutal showdown between the, at the time, champion Julia and challenger Tam Nakano. It was a match that had so much going into it just because of that really sort of harsh rivalry that existed between the two wrestlers. And even though that sort of pairing, that sort of head-to-head doesn't need a lot of promotion, the two of them put a ton of promotion going into that match. And I say that all to juxtapose what is going on with this year, which is we have the Red Belt champion Micah of EXV taking on none other than Oedo Tai's Momo Watanabe. And she declared her challenge to this title in Stardom American Dream at the very tail end of that event, the beginning of April, only to sort of thicken the plot as we have now learned that this match is not just a straightforward Red Belt Championship match. This is going to be a sort of a pioneering effort from Stardom, as they have declared this is the first ever, what they're calling a 3-round match, or I am looking at it sort of as a best of 3, because this match is going to involve different stipulations depending upon what phase we're actually in between champion Micah and challenger Momo Watanabe. This sort of I don't know if we want to call it a rivalry, but this clashing between Micah and Momo has been going on for a little bit of time. I would actually date this back all the way to the Cinderella tournament of last year, where the two of them had what I would call an underrated tournament match on the opening night of the Cinderella, which saw Momo Watanabe eliminate Micah by knocking her out of the ring. I think it was the over the top rope elimination style, but they did it in a very flashy and kind of violent way. And one of the things that I really liked about that match is how they combined Micah's lariats, her clotheslines, and her strength, and used that as sort of like a tactical implement against Momo Watanabe's kicks and her just vicious striking, utilizing kicks. And it was sort of like one limb against the other. And you got to see how the two of them utilized those techniques to try to one up the other. We've actually been seeing that very recently as the I believe it was the Osaka show that just happened last night. So some of these themes or some of these elements are resurfacing. So that was really the first time I noticed Micah and Momo being put in the ring together and having a really sort of watchable dynamic. This ended up carrying forth when they faced off in the 5-star Grand Prix. And during that Grand Prix, we saw once again Micah falling short as Momo Watanabe got a 3-count pin against her. And that stood out because Momo ended up being one of the very few people to actually get a win over Micah in a one-on-one situation. So it was really the first, I want to say it was one of the first pinfall losses we saw Micah take in 2023. Once again, cementing Momo Watanabe as a major threat. This sort of started to settle for a little while as Micah would begin her feud and her just really intense rivalry with Suzuki that year. But it did come back around because we saw a red belt challenge sort of tournament match take place in which the two finalists on either side of the battle lines were, of course, Micah on one side and Momo Watanabe on the other. This was a fantastic night of wrestling in Korakuen Hall. This was at the tail end of November of 2023. And this is when the entire sort of fandom of Stardom witnessed the absolute ascension of Micah as a top tier, extremely popular talent. This is when the crowd inside of Korakuen Hall became undeniable in their cheering and their support for Micah. And she carried that as sort of the face role against Momo in the one-on-one match in this Red Belt Challenge tournament and was able to overcome Momo Watanabe, utilizing the Michinoku Driver 2 to pin Momo for the 3 count and secure her right to challenge for the vacant Red Belt title at All-Star. No, it wasn't All-Star. It was Stardom Dream Queendom at the end of December of 2023. The rest ends up being history. Micah faces Suzuki for, the sort of final showdown as they clashed in the Grand Prix and the Goddess of Stardom Tag League and a number of other times in various house shows. Micah becomes the Red Belt champion and ushers us into the Empress era of 2024, in which Stardom is still sort of existing. We're still under the reign of the Empress, who has since formed the faction EXV alongside Mina Shirakawa. And possibly we will be talking about Mina and how she's been feuding with another Oedo Tai member these days. That one is a bit curious, but it's getting very, very, very hotly contested. So they're definitely trying to go somewhere with it. But Micah's reign is more front and center, at least for today's discussion. And with that being said, we have to take into account the people that Micah has defended her title against. Firstly, at the Stardom Supreme Fight Show of 2024, taking on one half of Aphrodite, taking on the Golden Phoenix, Saya Kamitani, in her first ever defense. And this is against someone who traditionally has given Micah a lot of trouble. Saya Kamitani is forever sort of tied to some of Micah's historical moments of falling short. We can think about the 2021 Cinderella tournament final, in which the two of these great wrestlers had a very grueling match after wrestling previously the same night. But it was the story of the Phoenix Splash overcoming Micah that night. And that would echo on as Saya Kamitani, defending her white belt title in 2022, defeated Micah in her hometown of Fukuoka for a very just resounding sense of, we won't call it superiority, but at least advantage held by the Golden Phoenix, as the Phoenix Splash once again fell Micah in her attempt to reach that just upper echelon. All of this sort of became reversed as Micah, as sort of taking on the role of the defending champion, was now welcoming on the challenge of Saya Kamitani. And they had quite a match at Supreme Fight. It was a long match. It featured some of the new super moves that Saya Kamitani has. She doesn't just have the Phoenix Splash. She's got the Phoenix Shine and the Phoenix Strike. And I don't remember the names or the particulars, but she tried a bunch of things and couldn't quite seal the victory, and never got to reach the top ropes and fully perform that Phoenix Splash. So that match had a lot of interesting sort of wrinkles to it. It also showed a new variation on the Michinoku driver from Micah, which she kind of needed to get past Saya in that match. That was defense one of the red belt, Stardom Supreme Fight 2024. We, of course, then saw Micah taking on the other half of Aphrodite. That was Utami Hayashishita. And at the time, we didn't know this, but it was going to be the last title challenge from Utami, who has since left Stardom and is now taking part in the Mari Gold promotion, which should be coming up in our discussion as well. At that point, when we get there, we'll expand a little bit on those upcoming events and the roster that's being built and promoted there. But the Utami and Micah match ended up nearly going to the full time limit. This was something that was almost like trench warfare. It was very grindy. It was very methodical and deliberate in its tempo. And it was about these heavy artillery moments, big weaponry, not a lot of speed and flash, but definitely a lot of power. And it's exactly what we would expect from someone like Micah and someone like Utami Hayashishita. We got a bit of finality there because Micah and Utami obviously have their own history as well. But that second defense, in which Micah did secure the pinfall, did not go to time, and proved to be able to handle both of the members of Queen's Quest on separate nights, separate occasions. That really let us know that Stardom is elevating Micah's status, not just in being a champion, but being a big match winning champion who afterwards traveled to America to defend her title as well. Now, Stardom American Dream is still in our recent memory. We've talked about it a little bit, but having Micah face her former, I don't want to say best friend, because that's a little bit far, and we don't want to demean the history that Micah has with Himeka, but a very close friend in Megan Bain, sometimes called Megasis. That match was something that I really appreciated that they did, because we never got to see the force that is Micah and the force that is Megan Bain really truly clash. They had always been united as allies, and to take Micah behind, let's say, enemy lines, or bring her to the American territory, and have one of the most dominant and one of the strongest booked wrestlers who've been in Stardom in recent time take Micah to the absolute limit, make Micah truly play as an underdog for a fairly lengthy match in its own right. Definitely not nearly as long as the match with Utami, but truly, truly resounding in these hellacious bumps and displays of sheer physical strength that being in the building, I'm sure for people watching on camera, just created an epic match. That was another thing that helped add, we'll say, accolades to Micah's reign. And now Micah is facing that challenge that I talked about earlier that has some history to it now in Oedo Tai's Momo Watanabe. Now, Momo Watanabe is not a faction leader. And in a sense, Micah is only a partial faction leader in her own right. She is someone who kind of shares a spotlight with Mina Shirakawa. And at times, Micah does seem to take center stage, but at other times, it seems like they're kind of two sides of a coin. And together, they are occupying that traditionally top of the food chain faction leader role. But pairing her against Momo Watanabe, as opposed to someone like Natsuko Tora or a faction leader like Utami Hayashishita was in the recent past, means that this match needs to have another wheel. It needs to have another gear that they can go to. And that's why I think, in part, they've decided to usher in this sort of best of three, or they're calling it a 3-round match. It's being referred to as the first ever 3-round match at this level in Stardom. So what does that mean? What is that? As far as I can tell from what I've read and tried to translate, that is a match that entails 3 different sets of stipulations. The first sort of round 1, I'm assuming it's going to be, is a standard 1 versus 1 match, pinfall, submission. The typical sort of rules that denote a winner or a loser will be in play. And that's going to be sort of the most clear cut and cleanest of the 3 rounds. The second round, I think it's the second round. If anyone has any information that is clarifying or to the contrary, please let me know, is a hardcore match. So this is when we start to drag things more into Momo Watanabe's reign. She's been showcasing her baseball bat, not only in matches, but in a lot of the promos with Micah. And I don't think she's actually gotten a chance to land the baseball bat on the champion since the 5-star Grand Prix last year. So I really think they're going to try and engineer or bake in something involving Momo's bat and it playing a key role somewhere along the lines in this match. It might be the thing that gets Momo a pinfall win in the hardcore portion, but I'm not entirely sure. So after that hardcore portion, because my assumption is that one person's going to win one of those rounds, the other person's going to win the other round, and we're going to be in sort of like a sudden death situation where we have to go to round 3 and we have to get some finality on what's going to happen. At All-Star Grand Queendom, the third round of this red belt title match is essentially a last woman standing match. I read it online through a translation as sort of a 10 count only rule, which I think is, those terms are probably interchangeable. It's kind of like if you get knocked down and you can't get up, the ref counts to 10 and you're still laid out, you're still out for the count, you are unable to stand because the adversity, the attrition has been just too overwhelming. At that point, the match is called and we will have a definitive winner at All-Star Grand Queendom. Or will we? Because there is, of course, the possibility for a double knockout in this type of rule set. And that would harken back to something maybe like Utami Hayashishita versus Shuri, a very notorious match, of course. I kind of wonder if we're playing this game of a best of 3 and potentially one person gets a win on one side, one person gets a win on the other side, and there is a final sort of definitive third round that needs to be enacted. Will we get that sort of cancellation, that nullification, those two forces, an unstoppable force and an immovable object crashing into each other at full intensity and both competitors being knocked unconscious? I think it's possible. I don't know really how likely, but it is something I have been thinking about. This, of course, is yet to be seen. This is something we're going to have to watch and observe and study on the way to All-Star Grand Queendom. The match itself, I'm expecting to be quite good. There's not a lot I can say that would cause me to doubt either Micah or Momo Watanabe, but with the sort of the historical, or we'll say, 1 year's past context of the Julia Tam Nakano match that had so much fire surrounding it. I am curious what people think of this being the follow up, the spiritual successor. Micah on one side, leading her own faction in her, this will be her fourth title defense against Momo Watanabe, who has been a challenger of a number of titles up to this point, but Inoue Tai has not drilled in that huge success in singles competition, but she's trying to drag Micah into more of her territory, a more brutal set of rules, weaponry, knocking people out, all of these sort of bad intentions that will circulate around this match. So, is this a worthwhile? I think this is going to be the main event of All Star Grand Queendom. It's possible that the IWGP match is instead, but if you were paying attention to the Stardom live stream last night, Micah got top billing in the announcing of the match, and she was on a tag team with Mayu Iwatani. But Mayu Iwatani was announced as the IWGP champion, and then after that, Micah got sort of that top tier, we'll say, headlining act spot, and that leads me to believe that in All Star Grand Queendom, the match order will sort of follow suit. The red belt will be lofted, or I don't know if that's the right word. The red belt title match will be elevated to this star position, center stage, all spotlights on it. It is the match that closes the night. Is it a worthy title match? Is my question. If you have any thoughts on that, feel free to chime in through any means you like. You can always send me comments if you want to bring this to a discussion over Twitter or X, as some people call it. By all means, I'm sure people have thoughts on, who they think should walk out with the red belt. But what do you think of it as a match to headline All Star Grand Queendom overall? Now, if you've been tuning in up to this point, thanks very much. I am going to take a quick break here. I'm going to try and iron out some technical details. Plan is to bring Meerkat Ultra on board, but we've realized that sort of the customs and the various red tape involved with transporting meerkats across the internet, it's a little more scraggly than than we possibly first assumed. So I'm going to get to work on that. We're going to take a couple minutes worth of a break. Once again, thanks for tuning in, and we will jump back on board shortly. All right, we are back again. Thank you so much for tuning in to this 100 subscriber live stream experiment, testing out the live media, testing the capabilities of different types of content on the channel here. As you may have heard, if you've been listening lately, we are talking about All-Star Grand Queendom at the moment, which of course is the upcoming big pay-per-view for World Wonder Ring Stardom. It is taking place on April 27th, and we've just gotten finished talking about the upcoming red belt title match between Micah of the EXV faction and Momo Watanabe of Oedo Tai. That is being touted as the first ever sort of 3-round match or best of 3 in the context of the red belt title. And I'm still curious to hear if people think this is a well put together match. Has it been promoted strongly? Is it worthy of the spot that it is gaining at such a big show? If we really compare this year's All-Star Grand Queendom to last year's, there are definitely some contrasts that we can draw. There are some things that feel a lot different about this year. So many crazy turns of events or current events going on with Stardom. Obviously, the firing of Rossi Ogawa, the departure of so many wrestlers from this just amazing stable or roster that we just have always been able to enjoy, and we've seen so much from. And now we're in this kind of strange place where the events themselves are being announced at odd times, and the buildup that could be sort of underlying this show is not as it was last year. It's much, much, much different. Is that a good thing? Do you think it's still a very much watchable upcoming show? Do you think it's going to live up to the hype that is currently sort of bolstering it? Well, that depends on where you're coming from, what your point of view is. But we have a number of other matches that we can get into and discuss, because there are so many title matches on this particular pay-per-view, All-Star Grand Queendom. We talked about the red belt. Why don't we go into the white belt title match between champion Saori Ano and the challenger, who is the Cinderella Tournament winner of 2024 from the Stars faction, Hanan. Some have referred to her as almost like a mini Mayu, like a future ace of Stardom. There is so much potential that people see in Hanan, and she has lived up to a lot of that potential. If you consider her Future of Stardom title reign, and you consider the Cinderella tournament that she had this year's tournament was so full of emotion and story, and the people that Hanan faced really meant something in the context of her overall career and the biggest moments of her work in Stardom. She faced sort of her past, her present, her future. She faced her rivals. She faced people that I think will continue to sort of travel story wise, narrative wise, along a trajectory that is parallel to hers. And now she's in a place where I'm pretty sure this has to be the first time she's ever challenged for this belt, where she might get the one of the most venerated positions in the company as white belt champion. Now, there's someone who has something to say about that. We have our reigning champion, Saori Ano, who, like Micah, secured her title at Dream Queendom at the end of December. And Saori Ano was somebody that I was not expecting to be white belt champion. She had a strange building kind of back and forth rivalry with Mirai. It kind of began in last year's 5-star Grand Prix. I've actually gone back and watched the match between Saori Ano and Mirai at the Grand Prix, and I think it's really, really good. It's worth revisiting because their contrasting level of physicality presents something in a match that not everyone can do. Mirai obviously has a ton of explosive power, strength. she's got these just ultra hard hitting concrete moves. But that's not Saoriano's style at all. Saoriano has something truly unique in her presentation in the ring and the way that she melds the poise and the elegance of her exterior persona with the very agile and sort of slinky and snake-like movements that she brings to a match. And then she just gets wild at some point with a lot of these opponents. She allows this inner almost insanity and the ability to torment and play with the mind of her opponent to take shape in the match in some way. Now, in the Grand Prix, they didn't have a lot of time to work that out or figure that out, but they put a decent amount of contrast and chemistry into their effort in the 5-star Grand Prix. And that was when we saw a very surprising roll up from Saoriano, securing her first win against Mirai and kind of shocking the Blue Stars block in the 5-star. I think that was at Korakuen Hall as well. And that crowd was not expecting Saoriano to get one over on, at the time, the white belt champion in 2023. That feud, or I don't know if we want to call it a feud, but that sort of dynamic carried on later when Saoriano challenged for the white belt for the first time. And I can't remember the exact event. It was either Gold Rush or was it called Golden Fight? One of the late 2023 Stardom events. I don't have all my cataloged information with me today. This is a little bit more of a fast and loose kind of casual chat. But Saoriano ended up taking Mirai to a 30-minute time limit draw. Again, another unexpected result when the two of these wrestlers entered the ring. And that match is one I have not yet revisited, but I definitely need to, because there are some mixed reactions to it. There are mixed feelings. Some people think it's brilliant. Some people think it was very drawn out and overly sort of dramatic and slow paced. I need to give it a second watch. I didn't quite lock in with it when I first watched it. It kind of gave you the sense that they were building towards a draw even early on, because they started the match so slowly, only to find out that is exactly what they were trying to do. But the thing that always stood with me, or just stuck out to me in that particular match, was the fact that Mirai just kept hammering Saoriano with move after move, technique after technique, lariat after lariat. And no matter what she could do, she tried everything I've seen Mirai try to do to somebody, she did to Saoriano, and none of it was enough to get Saori to stay down, shoulders to the mat for the count of 3. Saoriano just wouldn't go away. She would not allow herself to fail. And so 30 minutes went by. Mirai was definitely in charge of the match, and she just kept blasting with various detonations of her just violent moveset, and couldn't beat Saori no matter what. And so that was the thing that always stood out to me, is how they were positioning Saori as this figure in Mirai's storyline, and having that sort of like canceled out result was very curious at the time. We come to find out after the fact that it was likely a result of contrasting booking decisions being made on one side by Rossi Ogawa, who we have to assume is a fan of Mirai, and on the other side, Bushi Road, who seemingly are pretty high on Saori. They have signed her to a more or less exclusive contract, which that in and of itself is quite a surprising thing to be seeing. Then we come to find out, not long after that 30-minute draw, that Saoriano is challenging a second time in a row. We're getting an immediate rematch on behalf of a title challenger, which I don't think I've ever seen before. But for Saori, they made it happen. And, that becomes, sort of history in its own right at Stardom Dream Queendom, where we see shades of the 30-minute time limit draw coming back. Mirai putting everything she can into her her upper level offense, these finishing moves, these devastating these devastating slams. But Saori again refuses to say die. And Saori finds something in herself that overcomes Mirai this time. So we have an overall match record of Saori with 2 wins, Mirai with no wins, and a 30-minute time limit draw between them. So just an utter, I guess we want to say, a subversion of what I would have expected from the defending white belt champion of the time, Mirai. Come to find out later, Mirai is not long for Stardom World, and of course has moved on to Marigold herself. But that puts us with Saori in the driver's seat here. The white belt reign that has been Saori Aно's been a little bit slow going. We have 1 title defense. Comparatively, Micah has made 3 in the same amount of time. And that title defense saw Saori at Supreme Fight defending against Starlight Kid, who herself defeated Hanan in a white belt challenger sort of, I can't remember, it was like a rumble of some kind or battle royale, something involving a lot of wrestlers, and only one can be the winner ultimately. Now, the history between Starlight Kid and Hanan is really interesting as well, and that dates back to the New Blood tag title picture. I don't want to get too far in the weeds with who beat who when and what match happened here, but the crux of everything is that Hanan has gone on this year to undergo this sort of like transformation. As she entered the Cinderella tournament, she has the New Blood tag title around her waist, or one half of it, and she has faced a number of, like, it's almost like she's been running the gauntlet, facing the former Cinderella tournament winner Mirai, facing Starlight Kid, who they've been going back and forth for a little while, facing Ruaka, who I believe is the person that Hanan took the Future of Stardom title from, and then in the final round of the Cinderella tournament, facing Ami Sourei, who was the person to take the belt off of Hanan. I might be getting my Future of Stardom sort of lineage a little bit mixed up, so if I got some of those details incorrect, I apologize. You can definitely let me know. Hanan's been really drawing attention from people and a lot of support as well. If you hear some of the crowds when she wrestles, they're behind her. And it makes me wonder what's going to happen here at All-Star Grand Queendom. Last year, I mentioned that we had 5 title matches in 2023, and all 5 titles changed hands. This year, I'm highly doubting that will happen, but it does make me wonder how many titles will change hands, if any, because at face value for all of these matches, you could easily see the champions retaining. Something in the back of my mind makes me question if that's what's going to actually happen. And I think Hanan's chances, depending on who you ask, are pretty good. Or maybe it's too early for her. Maybe her first challenge, even though she's got the accolade of the Cinderella tournament, she's got the accolade of the New Blood tag tournament, or not tournament, but championship and multiple defenses. Maybe she's building up a huge resume this year, or maybe she's already gotten far enough for now, and her journey is going to involve not crossing the finish line at All-Star Grand Queendom. I could see either side of this, because there's been a lot of talk, especially when Saori Ano won the belt, that the true destination is for Saori Ano to face one of her closest friends, Natsupoi, for the white belt. That seemed very, very, very likely when Saori won, but over time, that sort of narrative from fans and also just from what's being promoted on the shows has dimmed down. It's not as bright of an obvious signal flare in the distance. I think there's some possible eventual progression that doesn't actually feature that Natsupoi versus Saori Ano one-on-one match. But I'm very conflicted about this, because that almost seems like the obvious thing to do. There are a couple of different permutations of where the white belt can go. Having Saori Ano only defend once and then lose the title, it very much echoes Saori Ano's typical MO. She was an Artist of Stardom champion. short-lived. She was a Goddess of Stardom champion, short-lived. Will this sort of continue the lineage of Sauriano, which is to get a belt, defend it about one time, and then move on to something else? I wonder about this, especially because she has signed that contract with World Wonder Ring Stardom, which not a lot of people were expecting. Sauriano has been this freelancer, um, often nomadic, moving between different promotions, always retaining her sense of character and sense of self, but never being really pinned down to one specific place. As far as I know, if that's not accurate, I'm open to hearing hearing a more accurate take. So, because she was sort of wrangled in, roped in by Stardom, she has this clearly close connection with Cosmic Angels and the other members of that group. Is she now settling into like a longer, more meaningful, more dominant sort of title reign? We're going to find out very soon when we check out All Star Grand Queendom and see how that match between Hanan and Sauriano plays out. The drama and intensity is there. If you see their sort of preview matches, the house show stuff, it's very much there. Hanan is gunning for this title. She's feeling her destiny sort of manifesting in front of her. She's charging forward. That lioness sort of aspect of her persona is really coming to the forefront. She's internalizing that sort of her that aspect of her character, putting it into her matches, putting it into her physicality, putting it into this rivalry with Sauriano. Will it be enough to carry her onto a I don't want to say miraculous and I don't want to say young because she's kind of a veteran, Hanan is, but an upstart reign, a sort of very, I guess, fresh, anything is possible type of reign versus the calm and collected Sauriano who kind of awaits any challenger. There's been talk of maybe Hazuki challenging later. There's been talk of course, Natsupoi, as I mentioned. So I'm not articulating my thoughts quite as well as I'd like with this, but I think the feeling of Hanan being a white belt champion has something very particular to it that not every wrestler can bring about. It almost feels like when Sayakami Tani became white belt champion. The feeling that this new type of era of someone with a lot of potential stepping into the spotlight and utilizing that potential and allowing it to bloom, allowing it to be cultivated. That's kind of what I see with a potential Hanan white belt win. I don't know if it's going to happen though. And with that, we're going to take another break because we're still trying to work on this sort of covert contraband smuggling operation, getting a Meerkat across internet lines, and hopefully we can make that happen. My plan was only to go for about an hour, and we're kind of getting close to that. So we'll see. Willing to make some more time if we can make the transfer happen. But if you have been listening, thank you so much. Give me any feedback you like, and we're gonna take another break here, and we'll be back in a little bit. Maybe talk a few more things and see what we can do. All right, thanks, guys. Okay. We are back. Once again, thank you for tuning in to this 100 subscriber live stream here at Six. Oh, that's not the name, is it? String Six Splash. Uh, this is a first attempt at live streaming for this channel. Hopefully, things are working well in terms of audio and video and some of the various sort of presentation pieces and overlays and banners and things like that. We have been going for a little bit over an hour with a few breaks in between. I was not, in fact, expecting to talk continuously this long and go on my diatribes and things like that. Um, so hopefully it hasn't been too rambly or too long-winded for people, but definitely needed to take a couple of breaks there. We've been talking about All-Star Grand Queendom, which is coming up, and I do plan to have some more material going over some of those details. So I don't want to go over absolutely everything. And like I said, we've already been going for about an hour, give or take, with some some interludes in between. Now, the endeavor of transferring meerkats across internet lines has proven to be very difficult. And hopefully, Meerkat Ultra is okay, because I'm not entirely sure of Meerkat's current status or whereabouts. So, best wishes. Unfortunately, I don't think Meerkat is going to be arriving in time. And I wasn't planning to do an extended live stream. So, I think what we'll do is plan to close down this live stream in the next couple of minutes and hopefully get to do something in the future if the details, the technical details will allow. But if you have been checking this out, it's much appreciated. I'm going to plug some things for myself. Obviously, you're here at String Six Splash, which is the channel. I do a show called Red Belt Radio, which you can also search for. You can find that on YouTube pretty easily, just searching for that. Always covering Stardom, uh, the current events, the upcoming sort of big matches and big shows, and a number of different details that exist in the outer orbit. We, of course, have Mari Gold, which is taken shape, it is forming, it is formulating their first show, Mari Gold Fields Forever, which will be happening next month in the month of May. And I haven't really had much chance to discuss Mari Gold and those developments. And it's a very, very sort of like important topic, but it's also one that's drummed up a lot of interest. I've been dealing with illness and that's kind of hurt my ability to get in the mix talking about it. And definitely want to be able to talk about it with folks like Meerkat Ultra, because his perspective on Mari Gold, coming from his fandom of actress girls and his fandom of Stardom, is very, very key. He's got such a great perspective on the different individual wrestlers who are going to be merging into this new promotion. So I think that type of conversation is best reserved for talking with someone like Meerkat Ultra, or formulating into a future iteration of some of my content, rather than just kind of flying off the cuff here. You can follow me on Twitter at String Six Splash as well. Definitely planning to have some more material surrounding All-Star Grand Queendom, Mari Gold, a number of the things coming along. Don't forget that Mayu Iwatani's biopic is coming out next month, in the month of May. That is called Runaway Wrestler, and they've been promoting the heck out of it at Stardom shows and various things. So keep an eye out for all of these things, because there's going to be a lot to discuss in the very near future. Now, if you have some ideas for future live stream content, I'm all ears. I'm curious about how this is running. I'm curious about what's possible in the future. So if you have suggestions, feel free to send them my way and I will consider them, just to see like what other things we can add to the channel to make it stronger. So if you do find this valuable, you find any of the content around valuable, please give my content a like. You can subscribe to the channel, of course, and you can, of course, leave comments to let me know what you think. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we will be talking to you very, very soon. And I hope you have a good rest of your day. All right. Thanks for tuning in.